The great crystal halls of Nexus Prime had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from 847 different worlds filled the massive chamber, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that stretched as far as the eye could see. Some floated in the air with gossamer wings, others stood tall on four legs like ancient trees, and many more walked on two legs like the beings they were about to discuss. The Galactic Confederation held this meeting only once every 1,000 years. It was a time when all the major species came together to discuss the future of their shared galaxy. For 10,000 years they had maintained peace through this system. Trade flowed freely between worlds. Wars were settled through debate, rather than violence, and new species were welcomed into their great family with open arms. High above the crowd on a platform made of pure starlight stood the most important beings in the galaxy. The Council of 12 represented the oldest and wisest species. They had guided the Confederation through countless challenges and had never failed to find solutions that worked for everyone. Admiral Corvash of the Altarian Empire straightened his golden uniform as he looked out over the assembly. His people controlled the largest fleet in the galaxy and were known for their military discipline. Next to him, Chancellor Vex of the Corvan hegemony adjusted her ceremonial armor. The Corvans were the finest warriors anyone had ever seen, and their armies kept the peace on 1,000 worlds. On the other side of the platform, Mind Speaker Thurion of the Etherian Collective closed his three eyes in meditation. His people could read thoughts and speak without words, making them perfect diplomats. Near him, Tech Lord Braxis of the Zephyrian Union checked his mechanical implants. The Zephyrians had built most of the technology that held the Confederation together. But at the far edge of the platform, almost forgotten by the others, sat a figure that commanded respect through age alone. Elder Zethkari was the last living member of the progenitor race. Her people had once ruled the entire galaxy, but that was so long ago that most species thought of them as myths. She looked ancient beyond measure, her pale skin stretched tight over fragile bones, her white hair flowing like spider silk around her shoulders. The progenitors had built the first starships, created the first hyperspace lanes, and established the first peaceful contact protocols. But 50,000 years ago they had simply vanished from the core worlds. Most people believed they had died out. Only a few knew that they had chosen to retreat to the empty spaces between galaxies, watching from afar as younger species took their place. "The 1,000-year gathering will now begin," announced Admiral Corvash, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive hall. "We come together today to celebrate another millennium of peace and prosperity." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Representatives waved their flags, tentacles, or whatever appendages they possessed. The Confederation had much to celebrate. In the past 1,000 years, they had welcomed 67 new species into their alliance. Wars had become almost unknown. Even the most dangerous threats were handled through careful diplomacy and economic pressure. "Before we begin our main discussions," Admiral Corvash continued, "Elder Zethkari has requested permission to address the assembly. As the last of the progenitors, she has earned the right to speak first." The cheering died down to polite applause. Most of the younger species had never seen a progenitor before. They knew the history, of course, but ancient history felt like ancient history. The galaxy had moved far beyond whatever wisdom the old races might have possessed. Elder Zethkari rose slowly from her chair. She moved with the careful steps of someone who had lived far too long and seen far too much. When she reached the speaking platform, she stood quietly for a moment, her ancient eyes scanning the crowd as if she could see something they could not. "My children," she began, her voice soft but somehow carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have watched this galaxy grow and change for more years than most of your species have existed. I have seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. I have witnessed the birth of stars and the death of worlds." She paused and the hall fell completely silent. There was something in her tone that demanded attention, even from those who had planned to ignore her speech. "Today I must share with you a warning that my people discovered long ago. It is carved in quantum crystal in our most ancient vaults, written in the early days when we still believed we could control the forces we had awakened." Tech Lord Braxis shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Zephyrians prided themselves on their scientific approach to everything. Ancient prophecies and mystical warnings made him nervous. The warning speaks of a young species, Elder Zethkari continued, bipedal beings from a small world circling a yellow star. The prophecy says, "When the young bipeds of the third world claim the void, let none stand against them, for they are chaos incarnate, and chaos cannot be contained." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several representatives laughed openly. Chancellor Vex of the Corvin hegemony leaned forward in her chair. "With respect, Elder," she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. "We appreciate the historical perspective, but surely you cannot expect us to take such vague warnings seriously. We have the most advanced military in galactic history. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can stop supernovas. What possible threat could a primitive species pose?" More laughter echoed through the hall. The idea that any single species could threaten the Confederation seemed absurd. They had the combined might of nearly 1,000 worlds. They had technology that bordered on the magical. They had solved every major conflict through superior force or superior diplomacy. Elder Zethkari's expression did not change. She had expected this reaction. She had lived through this same scenario before in the early days of her own people's empire. "You misunderstand the nature of the threat," she said quietly. "It is not their technology that makes them dangerous. It is not their numbers or their weapons. It is something far more fundamental. They do not think as we think. They do not accept limitations as we do. When faced with the impossible, they do not surrender. They adapt." Mindspeaker Thurian opened his 3 eyes and focused his mental powers on the Elder. He tried to read her thoughts to understand what she really believed. What he found there made him uncomfortable. Her mind was filled with images of burning worlds and shattered fleets, but they felt like memories rather than imagination. "Elder," he said carefully, "your thoughts suggest you have seen such events before, but surely that is impossible. No species has ever seriously threatened the Confederation." "No," she replied, and for the first time, her voice carried a note of sadness. "No species has threatened this Confederation, but there have been other confederations, other empires, other gatherings of proud species who believed nothing could stand against them." The hall fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, uncomfortable. Several representatives shifted in their seats or whispered to their neighbors. "My people learned the truth of this prophecy 50,000 years ago," Elder Zethkari continued. "We encountered the bipeds when they were still young, still trapped on their single world. Even then, we could see the signs, their incredible adaptability, their refusal to accept defeat, their disturbing tendency to find new solutions to old problems." "What happened?" asked Admiral Korvash, though part of him was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "We chose wisdom over pride," and the Elder replied. "We withdrew from the core worlds before the confrontation could begin. We moved to the empty spaces between galaxies and watched from afar as other species took our place. It was the most difficult decision my people ever made, but it was the right one." "That's ridiculous," Chancellor Vex said, standing up from her chair. "You're telling us that your people, who ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, ran away from a primitive species that couldn't even leave their own planet?" "Yes," Elder Zethkari said simply. "We ran, and we survived." The crowd erupted in discussion. Some representatives were angry, feeling that the Elder was insulting their intelligence. Others were curious, wondering if there might be truth to the ancient warning. A few, particularly those from older species, looked thoughtful and concerned. Admiral Korvash raised his hand for silence. "Elder Zethkari, we appreciate your concern, but we must deal with current reality rather than ancient prophecies. The Confederation has maintained peace for 10,000 years precisely because we approach problems rationally rather than giving in to superstition." Before the Elder could respond, a communication officer rushed into the hall. The young Altarian's golden skin was flushed with excitement as he approached the council platform. "Admiral," he said breathlessly, "we have urgent news from the Outer Rim. The deep space monitoring stations have detected something unprecedented. Admiral Korvash frowned. Nothing was supposed to interrupt the 1,000-year gathering except the most extreme emergencies. What is it? He demanded. Radio signals, sir. Organized, structured radio signals from an uncharted system. The analysis teams believe they represent communication between multiple locations on a single planet. The hall fell completely silent. New species were discovered regularly, but organized planetary communication meant a species had reached industrial levels of development. Such discoveries were rare and always important. Which system? Tech Lord, Braxis asked, his mechanical implants already calculating probable locations. Sol system, sir. The third planet from a yellow star approximately 26,000 light-years from here. Elder Zethkari closed her eyes and sighed deeply. After 50,000 years of waiting, the moment had finally arrived. The young bipeds of the, third world, she whispered, though her words somehow carried to every corner of the hall. They have claimed the void. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. A new species meant new opportunities for trade, new cultural exchanges, new allies. For the Confederation, several representatives were already making plans for first contact missions. This is wonderful news, Admiral Korvash announced. We will immediately begin standard first contact protocols. In accordance with Confederation law, we will approach them peacefully, assess their development level, and offer them the opportunity to join our great alliance. No! Elder Zethkari's voice cut through the celebration like a laser through paper. She stood as straight as her ancient frame would allow, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made several representatives step backward. You do not understand what you are about to unleash, she said. This species is not like the others you have welcomed into your alliance. They are not content to accept the role you assign them. They will not be satisfied with junior membership and restricted technology. They will push and test and challenge every limitation you place upon them. Then we will handle them as we have handled every other difficult species, Chancellor Vex said firmly. Through superior strength and careful management, no single world can stand against the combined might of the Confederation. Elder Zethkari looked at her with something that might have been pity. You still do not understand, she said. They are not dangerous because they are strong. They are dangerous because they refuse to accept that they are weak. When you show them your superior technology, they will not be awed. They will ask how it works. When you demonstrate your superior firepower, they will not surrender. They will plan how to defeat it. Impossible, scoffed Tech Lord Braxis. No primitive species could challenge technology that has been refined over thousands of years. They will not challenge it, the elder replied. They will improve it. They will find applications you never considered. They will combine it with ideas you never imagined. And they will do it faster than you think possible. Mind Speaker Thurian focused his powers again, trying to penetrate deeper into the elder's thoughts. What he found there terrified him. Images of ships burning in space, worlds going dark, proud species begging for mercy that never came, and through it all, a relentless tide of beings who looked remarkably like many of the species in the current Confederation. Elder, he said quietly, what exactly are you asking us to do? Leave them alone, she replied. Do not make contact. Do not try to integrate them into your alliance. Let them develop at their own pace in their own way, and hope that when they finally reach the stars, they remember that some species chose wisdom over confrontation. The suggestion sent shock waves through the assembly. The Confederation had never simply ignored a newly discovered species. Their entire philosophy was built on the idea that all intelligent life could benefit from joining their peaceful alliance. That's impossible, Admiral Korvash said firmly. The Confederation exists to bring peace and prosperity to all intelligent species. We cannot simply ignore them. Then you have chosen your path, Elder Zethkari said. She walked slowly back to her chair, moving like someone attending a funeral. I pray that your confidence is justified, but I fear that in a few short years, you will understand why my people chose exile over extinction. The communication officer cleared his throat nervously. Sir, what are your orders regarding first contact? Admiral Korvash looked around the council platform. Every member except the elder was nodding in agreement. The path forward was clear. Prepare a first contact mission, he ordered. Use standard protocols. Approach them peacefully, assess their development level, and offer them membership in the Confederation. Yes, sir, the officer replied, already activating his communication device to relay the orders. As the officer left the hall, Elder Zethkari spoke one final time. Her voice was so quiet that only those closest to her could hear the words, but somehow they seemed to echo through the chamber like a prophecy of doom. When you stand before them, she whispered, remember that you chose this path. Remember that an old woman tried to warn you. And remember that some threats cannot be conquered, only unleashed. The 1,000-year gathering continued for 3 more days, but the mood had changed. The excitement about the new species was tempered by the elder's warnings, though most representatives dismissed her concerns as the paranoid ramblings of an ancient mind. Only a few, mostly from the oldest species, left Nexus Prime with a sense of unease. They had lived long enough to know that sometimes the most important warnings came from those who had seen the consequences of ignoring them. Far away, on a BIDL, small blue world orbiting a yellow star, radio signals continued to pulse into space. The beings who sent them had no idea that they had been discovered. They had no knowledge of the vast confederation of species that was even now preparing to change their lives forever. They continued their daily routines, unaware that somewhere in the depths of space, an old woman was weeping for the future she could see coming. 5 years had passed since the 1,000-year gathering, and Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Empire stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Call as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The ship was beautiful even by Confederation standards, its golden hull gleaming like a captured star against the black of space. Beginning passive scans of the system, reported Science Officer Kethran, her forearms dancing across the control panels with practiced ease. Confirming previous observations, 9 planets, several asteroid belts, 1 inhabited world in the optimal zone. Veltar nodded as he studied the displays. The system looked unremarkable by galactic standards. The star was stable and middle-aged. The planets showed normal formation patterns, and there were no unusual energy signatures or dangerous phenomena. It was exactly the kind of system where a developing species might evolve peacefully. Focus. Scans on the 3rd planet, he ordered. I want to know everything about them before we make contact. The scans revealed a world that was both familiar and strange. The planet was covered in water and land masses that reminded Veltar of dozens of other worlds he had visited. But there were differences that made him uncomfortable. The cities were larger than expected for a species that had only recently discovered radio communication. The industrial activity was more intense than normal for their apparent development level. Sir, Kethran said, her voice puzzled. The energy readings don't match our expectations. They're producing far more power than they should be able to generate with primitive technology. Elaborate, Veltar replied. Well, based on the radio signals, we estimated they had achieved basic electromagnetic communication about 50 years ago. That suggests a certain level of scientific understanding. But the energy output we're seeing suggests they've already mastered nuclear reactions. Veltar frowned. It was unusual but not unheard of for a species to develop unevenly. Some focused on communication, others on energy production. The important thing was that they were clearly intelligent and had achieved planetary coordination. Any signs of space travel? He asked. Primitive chemical rockets, the science officer reported. They've achieved orbital flight and have placed several artificial satellites around their world. Nothing that could threaten interstellar travel for at least several decades. That was reassuring. The Confederation had strict protocols about contacting species that had achieved interstellar capability. Those situations required much more careful handling. A species still trapped in their home system was much easier to integrate safely. Communications. Officer Xanthek, Veltar called to a tall, thin being at the back of the bridge. Are you ready to begin first contact protocols? Yes, sir, Xanthek replied. his mental abilities already reaching out to sample the electromagnetic spectrum around the planet. I've been monitoring their communication patterns. They use multiple languages and appear to have several different political groups, but there are enough similarities that I should be able to construct basic communication algorithms. Begin the approach, Veltar ordered. Standard peaceful contact pattern. Let them see us coming, but slowly enough that they don't panic. The Harmony's call began moving toward Earth at a speed that would bring them into orbit in approximately 6 hours. As they traveled, every instrument on the ship focused on the small blue world ahead of them. What they found continued to puzzle the crew. "Sir," Catherine said, "I'm detecting weapons signatures." "What kind of weapons?" Veltar asked, though. He was not particularly concerned. Most developing species had primitive military technology. "That's the problem, sir. Some of them are primitive, but others are surprisingly advanced. I'm reading chemical explosives, projectile weapons, and... Sir, I think they have nuclear weapons." Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. Nuclear weapons were a significant development milestone. Most species didn't achieve nuclear technology until they were much closer to achieving space travel. A species that had nuclear weapons but was still trapped on one planet was potentially very dangerous. "How many nuclear weapons?" he asked. "Thousands, sir, distributed across multiple political groups." This was disturbing news. The Confederation had protocols for dealing with nuclear-capable species, but they usually involved much more careful and gradual contact. A species with thousands of nuclear weapons might react very badly to the sudden appearance of alien ships. "Sir?" Communications Officer Xanthek interrupted. "I'm receiving multiple signals from the planet. They've detected our approach." "Already?" Veltar was surprised. They were still several hours away from the planet, and their ship was using standard diplomatic shielding that should have made them nearly invisible to primitive sensors. "Yes, sir. They have orbital observation platforms that are more sophisticated than we expected. They're tracking our movement and trying to communicate with us using various frequencies." "Can you understand what they're saying?" "Basic translations are coming through now," Xanthek replied. "Most of the messages are requests for identification and statements of territorial claim. Several appear to be warnings to maintain distance from the planet." Veltar was impressed despite himself. Most species they contacted were completely shocked by the appearance of alien ships. These beings had detected their approach, identified them as artificial objects, and were already attempting communication. It showed remarkable adaptability and quick thinking. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Use standard first contact protocols, universal peace symbols, mathematical, progressions, basic friendship indicators. Channel open, sir." Veltar activated the ship's communication system and began transmitting the carefully designed signals that the Confederation used for all first contacts. Mathematical sequences that proved intelligence, simple pictures that showed peaceful intent, and basic information about the ship and its mission. The response came faster than expected. "Sir," Xanthek said, excitement clear in his voice, "they're responding with mathematical sequences of their own. But sir, these aren't the simple progressions we sent. They're sending us what appears to be advanced mathematical proofs." "What kind of proofs?" "Quantum mechanics equations, sir. Relativity calculations. And sir, they're correct. More than correct. They're elegant. Whoever wrote these has a very sophisticated understanding of physics." Veltar was beginning to feel uneasy. The intelligence reports had suggested a primitive species that had recently discovered radio. The reality was proving very different. "Continue the communication sequence," he ordered. "Let's see how far their knowledge extends." Over the next 2 hours, as the Harmony's call approached Earth, the communication became increasingly complex. The humans, as they called themselves, demonstrated knowledge of advanced physics, complex mathematics, and sophisticated engineering. More importantly, they asked questions that showed they understood the implications of interstellar travel and alien contact. "Sir," Xanthek reported, "they're asking about our propulsion system." "That's normal curiosity," Veltar replied. Though, privately, he was surprised by how quickly they had jumped to technical questions. "Yes, sir, but they're asking very specific questions. They want to know about hyperspace mechanics, energy requirements for faster-than-light travel, and... Xanthic paused, looking confused. Sir, they're asking about the theoretical framework for artificial gravity generation. Theoretical framework? Veltar felt another chill. You mean they've already worked out the theory? It appears so, sir. They're describing mathematical models that are very close to our actual technology. This was unprecedented. Most species needed decades or centuries of gradual technology transfer before they could even understand the principles behind hyperspace travel. These humans seem to have figured out the basics on their own. Sir, Kethran interrupted, we're being scanned. Scanned? By what? Multiple sources, sir. They have observation platforms throughout their system that are focused on us. But sir, the scans are very sophisticated. They're using techniques that I didn't think they should know about. Veltar walked to the main display and studied the tactical readout. Earth was surrounded by a network of satellites and space stations that were all pointed in their direction. The planet's entire observation capability was focused on their single ship. They're coordinating their response, he realized. This isn't random curiosity. They've organized a systematic study of our arrival. Sir, Xanthic added, they're asking if we represent a larger group or government. They want to know about the political structure of our society and our intentions regarding their world. Tell them we represent the Galactic Confederation, Veltar ordered. Explain that we're a peaceful alliance of many species and that we're here to offer them membership. The response came back within minutes, but it was not what Veltar expected. Sir, they're asking for proof of our claims. They want documentation of the Confederation's structure, examples of our technology, and what they call verification of peaceful intent. Verification? They want us to submit to detailed scans of our ship and weapon systems, sir. They're also requesting genetic samples and cultural exchange materials. Veltar was amazed. Most species were so overwhelmed by first contact that they accepted whatever the aliens told them. These humans were treating the encounter like a business negotiation. Furthermore, sir, Xanthic continued, they're insisting that any formal contact take place in what they call neutral space. They want us to meet with their representatives at a location away from both Earth and our ship. They don't trust us, Veltar realized. No, sir, they don't. They're being very polite about it, but they're clearly treating us as potentially hostile until proven otherwise. As the Harmony's call entered orbit around Earth, Veltar found himself looking down at a world that was both beautiful and disturbing. The cities glowed with electric light, creating patterns that were visible from space. Industrial complexes sent streams of smoke into the atmosphere. And everywhere the signatures of technology that was more advanced than it should be. Sir, Kethran said quietly, I'm detecting military activity on the surface. They're moving weapon systems and mobilizing their armed forces. How many weapons? Thousands of missile sites are becoming active, sir. Aircraft are being deployed in defensive patterns. And, sir, several of their naval vessels appear to be armed with nuclear weapons. Veltar realized that the humans were not just curious about their visitors. They were preparing for the possibility of war. Open a priority channel to Confederation. Command, he ordered. I need to speak with Admiral Korvash immediately. The communication took several minutes to establish across the vast distances of space. When Admiral Korvash's image appeared on the main screen, Veltar could see that he was in his office on Nexus Prime, probably reviewing routine reports. Ambassador Veltar, the Admiral said, how is first contact proceeding? Sir, we have a problem. This species is not what we expected. Veltar quickly summarized their discoveries. The advanced technology, the sophisticated questions, the military preparations, and most importantly, the complete lack of awe or submission that usually characterized first contact situations. Admiral Korvash listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. Ambassador, he said when Veltar finished, are you telling me that a primitive species has achieved nuclear weapons, advanced space observation, and sophisticated scientific knowledge? Yes, sir. And sir, they're not approaching this contact as supplicants seeking guidance. They're treating us as equals who happen to have better transportation. That's impossible. Our intelligence reports indicated a species that had barely achieved radio communication. Sir, I think our intelligence reports may have been incomplete. Based on what I'm seeing, they achieved radio communication 50 years ago, but they didn't stop there. They've been developing technology at an unprecedented rate. Admiral Corvash was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Veltar could see other Confederation officers moving around the command center, dealing with routine matters of galactic governance. Ambassador, continue with standard first contact protocols. Offer them junior membership in the Confederation. Provide basic technology transfers, and keep detailed records of everything they say and do. Sir, I don't think they're going to accept junior membership. What do you mean? They're asking questions about Confederation structure, decision-making processes, and member species rights. They're not asking, how can we join? They're asking, why should we join? Admiral Corvash's expression hardened. Ambassador, every species wants to join the Confederation. We offer peace, prosperity, advanced technology, and protection from external threats. No intelligent species has ever refused membership. Yes, sir, but these humans are different. They're already asking about technological restrictions, territorial limitations, and what they call sovereignty issues. Then educate them, the Admiral said firmly. Explain the benefits of Confederation membership. Show them what they can gain by joining our alliance. I'll do my best, sir. And Ambassador, keep a careful eye on their military activities. If they show any signs of aggression, withdraw immediately and call for a military escort. Understood, sir. The communication ended, leaving Veltar alone with his crew and a growing sense of unease. Below them, Earth continued its rotation, showing them vast continents filled with cities, industrial complexes, and military installations. It was a world that looked ready for anything. Sir, Xanthek reported, the humans are requesting permission to send representatives to our ship for direct negotiations. How many representatives? A delegation of 12, sir. They're calling them technical specialists and diplomatic personnel. Veltar considered the request. Standard protocols allowed for limited alien visits to Confederation ships, but usually only after basic trust had been established. Grant permission, he decided, but full security protocols. No access to sensitive areas and all communications monitored. Yes, sir. As Veltar watched Earth grow larger in the view screen, he found himself remembering Elder Zethkari's warnings from 5 years ago. The old progenitor had spoken of a species that would not accept limitations, that would challenge every assumption, that would refuse to be controlled. Looking down at the glowing cities and busy industrial complexes of Earth, Veltar was beginning to understand what she had meant. These humans were not going to be easy to integrate into the Confederation. In fact, he was starting to wonder if integration was possible at all. But surely the Admiral was right. No species had ever refused Confederation membership. The benefits were too obvious, the advantages too great. Once the humans understood what they were being offered, they would certainly accept, wouldn't they? 30 years had passed since first contact, and the Galactic Confederation was beginning to realize that humanity was unlike any species they had ever encountered. What had started as a routine integration process had become a constant source of tension and concern for the Confederate leadership. Admiral Thrackmore of the Corvin hegemony stood in the observation deck of the battlecruiser Iron Resolve, watching the unauthorized human colony of New Geneva through the viewport. The planet below looked peaceful enough with its blue oceans and green continents, but Thrackmore knew that appearances could be deceiving when dealing with humans. "Status report," he ordered, his gravelly voice echoing in the command center. "Captain," Bexra approached with a data pad, her expression troubled. "Sir, our scans confirm what the inspection team reported. The humans have built a fully functional industrial colony here, complete with advanced manufacturing facilities, defensive installations, and a population of nearly 2 million. 2 million? Thrackmore was shocked. Our intelligence reports indicated this system was uninhabited. It was uninhabited, sir. 6 months ago. The humans built all of this in less than 6 months. Thrackmore stared at the planet below. Building a colony from scratch in 6 months was virtually impossible. Even with advanced technology, most Confederation species needed years or decades to establish major settlements. How is that possible? They used modular construction techniques, sir, prefabricated components that could be assembled rapidly. But sir, the manufacturing capabilities they've established are far beyond what we authorized for human colonies. Thrackmore reviewed the data on his personal display. The humans had been granted limited technology transfers and permission to establish colonies in 3 specified systems. They were supposed to develop slowly and carefully, under Confederation guidance and supervision. Instead, they had somehow acquired advanced manufacturing technology, established colonies in dozens of unauthorized systems, and built industrial facilities that rivaled those of much older Confederation members. Sir, Captain Vexra continued, there's something else. We've detected weapons signatures. What kind of weapons? Unknown design, sir. They're not using any technology we provided them. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Thrackmore felt a familiar anger building in his chest. The Corvins had maintained galactic peace for thousands of years through superior military strength and careful management of technological development. The idea that a junior species might have developed weapons that his people couldn't identify was deeply disturbing. Open a communication channel to the planet, he ordered. I want to speak with whoever's in charge down there. The communication established quickly, and a human face appeared on the main screen. Thrackmore was always unsettled by human faces. They looked remarkably similar to several Confederation species, but there was something in their eyes that was different. They looked directly at you without the respectful deference that most species showed to their superiors. This is Governor Marcus Steele of New Geneva Colony, the human said. His voice was calm and confident, showing none of the fear that Thrackmore expected from someone facing a Corvin battle fleet. Governor Steele, Thrackmore replied. I am Admiral Thrackmore of the Corvin hegemony. You are in violation of Confederation settlement laws. This system was not authorized for human colonization. With respect, Admiral, Steele said, we checked the Confederation registry. This system was listed as unclaimed and available for development. The registry is for Confederation members in good standing. Humanity has junior membership status, which restricts your expansion rights. I see, Steele said, though his expression didn't change. And what do you intend to do about it? Thrackmore was taken aback by the directness of the question. Most species would have immediately begun apologizing and offering to negotiate. This human was asking about consequences as if he was planning to deal with them. You will immediately evacuate this system, Thrackmore ordered. All human personnel and equipment will be removed within 30 standard days. Furthermore, you will surrender all unauthorized technology for Confederation inspection. Steele was quiet for a moment, then smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Admiral, he said, I'm afraid that's not going to happen. Excuse me? I said that's not going to happen. New Geneva is a sovereign human colony. We have 2 million citizens here who have built their lives in this system. We're not abandoning their homes because of bureaucratic technicalities. Thrackmore felt his anger spike. No junior species had ever spoken to a Confederation admiral with such disrespect. Governor, Steele, you seem to misunderstand your situation. I have 12 battle cruisers in orbit around your planet. You have no choice in this matter. Actually, Admiral, I think it's you who misunderstands the situation. Before Thrackmore could respond, his tactical officer called out from across the bridge, Sir, new contacts appearing on sensors. What kind of contacts? Ships, sir. Human ships. They're decloaking all around us. Thrackmore spun toward the main tactical display and felt his blood run cold. Dozens of ships had appeared out of nowhere surrounding his fleet. They were sleek and angular, completely different from any human designs he had seen before. Where did they come from? He demanded. Unknown, sir. They weren't there a moment ago. They must have some kind of advanced stealth technology. On the communication screen, Governor Steele was still smiling. Those are our orbital defense platforms, Admiral. Fully automated, very fast, and equipped with weapons that your computers probably can't identify. Impossible, Thrackmore said. Humans don't have access to stealth technology or automated weapon systems. We don't have access to your stealth technology, Steele corrected. We developed our own. Turns out there are multiple ways to solve most engineering problems. You just have to be willing to think outside the box. Sir, the tactical officer called out. The human ships are targeting our vessels. I'm reading weapons lock from multiple sources. Thrackmore looked at the tactical display again. His 12 battle cruisers were outnumbered nearly 3-1 by ships of unknown capability. It was not the overwhelming advantage he had expected. Governor Steele, he said carefully, you cannot seriously be threatening Confederation military vessels. I'm not threatening anyone, Admiral. I'm simply pointing out that your presence here is unwelcome. This is sovereign human territory. You are not invited and you are not welcome. I'm asking you politely to leave. And if we refuse? Steele's smile faded, and for the first time Thrackmore saw something in the human's eyes that made him genuinely uncomfortable. It was not fear or anger, it was calculation. Then you'll discover that humans have become very good at solving problems, Steele said quietly. Thrackmore opened a private communication channel to his fleet commanders. All ships, defensive positions, prepare for possible engagement. Sir, came the reply from Captain Mordock of the battlecruiser Eternal Victory. These human ships are using unknown technology. I cannot guarantee the outcome of an engagement. Thrackmore stared at the tactical display. The Corvin hegemony had not lost a space battle in over 1,000 years. Their ships were the finest in the galaxy, their weapons the most powerful, their tactics refined through centuries of experience. But looking at the sleek human vessels surrounding his fleet, he felt something he had never experienced before. Uncertainty. Governor Steele, he said, reopening the communication channel, you are making a serious mistake. The Confederation has resources you cannot imagine. If you resist us here, you will bring the wrath of 1,000 worlds down upon humanity. Maybe, Steele replied. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today's problem is simpler. Are you going to leave peacefully or do we need to help you leave? The bridge of the Iron Resolve fell silent. Every officer was staring at their instruments, trying to understand how a confrontation with a primitive species had suddenly become a military standoff. Sir, the communications officer whispered, we're receiving priority transmissions from Confederation Command. They're ordering us to withdraw and avoid engagement. Thrackmore was stunned. Withdraw? Yes, sir. Admiral Corvash himself is on the channel. The main screen switched to show Admiral Corvash in his command center on Nexus Prime. The Altarian leader looked older than Thrackmore remembered, and there was strain in his golden features. Admiral Thrackmore, Corvash said, you will immediately withdraw your fleet from the Sol Sector. Return to Confederation space and await further orders. Sir, the humans are in violation of settlement laws. They're also threatening Confederation military vessels. I understand the situation, Admiral. New intelligence has come to light. Regarding human capabilities, engagement at this time would be inadvisable. Sir, with respect, we outnumber them. We have superior firepower. Do we? Corvash asked quietly. Admiral, 3 days ago, human ships appeared in 7 different Confederation systems simultaneously. They delivered messages to our regional commanders, then disappeared before our sensors could get detailed scans. They demonstrated the ability to penetrate our most secure space and withdraw without being detected. Thrackmore felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were staggering. Furthermore, Corvash continued, our intelligence services have discovered that humans have been secretly developing technology far beyond what we provided them. They appear to have reverse-engineered and improved upon every system we shared with them. How is that possible? We don't know. But Admiral, they've had 30 years to study our technology. Apparently, they've been very busy. On the communication screen, Governor Steele was still waiting patiently. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was listening to every word of the Confederation's internal communication. Are they monitoring our secure channels? Thrackmore asked quietly. We have to assume they are, Corvash replied. Admiral, withdraw your fleet. That's a direct order. Throckmore looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. These were veteran warriors who had never known defeat, but he could see uncertainty in their eyes for the first time. All ships, he announced, prepare to withdraw from the system. Very wise, Admiral, Governor Steele said from the main screen. And Admiral, the next time Confederation ships enter human space without permission, we won't be as polite about asking them to leave. The communication ended, leaving Throckmore staring at a blank screen. Around his fleet, the human ships maintained their positions, weapons still locked on Confederation vessels. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the human ships are holding position. They're not pursuing, but they're not standing down either. Execute withdrawal, Throckmore ordered. All ships return to Confederation space. As the Corvin fleet engaged their hyperspace drives and jumped away from New Geneva, Throckmore found himself thinking about Elder Zethkari's warnings from 35 years ago. The old progenitor had said that humans were dangerous not because they were strong, but because they refused to accept that they were weak. Looking at the tactical recordings of the encounter, Throckmore realized that the humans had never actually claimed to be stronger than the Confederation. They had simply refused to back down, and somehow that refusal had been enough to force a Confederation fleet to retreat. Back on Nexus Prime, Admiral Corvash stood in his command center, surrounded by reports from across the galaxy. Human activities were being detected in dozens of systems. Unknown ships using unknown technology were appearing and disappearing at will. And most disturbing of all, human representatives were making contact with other Confederation members, asking questions about trade agreements, territorial rights, and alliance structures. Sir, his aide reported, we've received formal communications from 17 different human colonies. They're all declaring independence from Confederation oversight. How many colonies do they have? Corvash asked. We're not sure, sir. Our last count was 12 authorized settlements. Now we're detecting human activity in over 50 systems. Corvash walked to the great window that looked out over Nexus Prime's capital city. For 10,000 years, this world had been the center of galactic civilization. The Confederation had brought peace and prosperity to nearly 1,000 species through careful management and superior strength. Sir, the aide continued, there's more. The humans are requesting a formal meeting with the Confederation Council. They want to discuss what they call revised terms of membership. Revised terms? Yes, sir. They're proposing full membership status with equal voting rights, unrestricted expansion privileges, and complete technological independence. Corvash was quiet for a long moment. In the history of the Confederation, no species had ever demanded equal status as a condition of membership. The system was built on hierarchy, with older and more advanced species guiding younger ones. And if we refuse their demands? They haven't said, sir, but based on today's events, I think we have to assume they're prepared for that possibility. Corvash thought about the tactical reports from Admiral Throckmore, human ships appearing and disappearing at will, technology that Confederation sensors couldn't identify, weapons systems of unknown capability. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Confederation was facing a species that might actually be able to challenge their authority. The question was what to do about it. Schedule a meeting with the full council, he ordered. We need to discuss our options. Yes, sir. What should I tell the humans about their request for negotiations? Corvash looked out at the peaceful cityscape below. 10,000 years of peace and prosperity had been built on the foundation of Confederation superiority. If that foundation was cracking, everything might come tumbling down. Tell them we'll consider it, he said finally, and start preparing contingency plans. If these humans want to challenge the Confederation, we need to be ready for them. As night fell over Nexus Prime, reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy. Human ships were moving through Confederation space with apparent impunity. Human colonies were declaring independence. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, an ancient warning was finally coming true. The young bipeds of the Third World had indeed claimed the void. And now no one knew how to stop them. The war began not with a declaration or a formal announcement, but with a simple message broadcast across every communication channel in the galaxy. The voice belonged to Admiral Sarah Chen, daughter of the original human ambassador, and now commander of the Human Colonial Defense Force. To all species of the Galactic Confederation, her voice carried clearly through space, reaching every inhabited world, every space station, and every ship in the galaxy. For 35 years, humanity has attempted to work within your system. We have followed your rules, accepted your restrictions, and tried to build a peaceful relationship with your alliance. In the command center of Nexus Prime, Admiral Korvash listened to the broadcast with growing dread. Around him, his staff worked frantically to trace the signal's origin, but the humans had somehow hijacked every communication satellite and relay station in Confederation space. However, Admiral Chen continued, recent events have made it clear that the Confederation cannot accept humanity as an equal partner. You see us as junior members who should be grateful for whatever scraps of technology and territory you choose to share. You cannot understand that we will never accept a position of permanent inferiority. Admiral Thrackmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive battlecruiser Eternal Victory, leading a fleet of over 200 Corvan warships toward the Sol system. The Confederation had decided that the human problem needed to be solved decisively, and the Corvans were the finest military force in the galaxy. Therefore, Chen's voice continued, humanity is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Confederation. All human colonies are now independent. All Confederation personnel have 48 hours to leave human space. Any military vessels that remain after that deadline will be considered hostile. Sir, reported Captain Mordock from the tactical station, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the Sol system. The humans appear to be activating defensive systems. Thrackmore studied the long-range sensors as his fleet approached the outer edge of the system. What he saw made him uneasy. The humans had transformed their home system into a fortress. Defensive platforms surrounded every major planet. Asteroid mining operations had been converted into weapons manufacturing facilities, and the space between worlds was filled with patrol ships using that mysterious stealth technology. How many ships are we facing? He asked. Unknown, sir. Our sensors can only detect the ones they want us to see. Based on industrial capacity estimates, they could have anywhere from 500 to 5,000 vessels. Thrackmore was not particularly concerned about the numbers. Corvan ships were larger, more heavily armed, and crewed by warriors with thousands of years of experience. Quantity had never been a substitute for quality. Admiral Chen's message concluded with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. To those who believe that might makes right, we offer this reminder. You have never faced an enemy that refuses to surrender. You are about to learn why that matters. The first engagement took place at the Kepler Station, a Confederation research facility in the outer Sol system. Admiral Thrackmore had planned to capture it intact and use it as a base for operations against Earth. It should have been a simple operation against a lightly defended target. Instead, it became a nightmare. The station had been evacuated, but as Corvan ships approached, it exploded with the force of a small star. The blast wave damaged 3 battlecruisers and completely destroyed 2 escort vessels. But that was just the beginning. As the Corvan fleet regrouped, human ships began appearing out of nowhere. They materialized behind Confederation vessels, fired devastating volleys of some kind of energy weapon, then vanished again before return fire could be targeted. It was like fighting ghosts. Sir, Captain Mordock reported, his voice strained. We've lost 7 ships and haven't managed to land a single hit on the enemy. How is that possible? Thrackmore demanded. They're using some kind of quantum tunneling technology, sir. They can appear anywhere in the system instantly, fire, and disappear before our targeting systems can lock on. Thrackmore had never encountered anything like it. In thousands of years of warfare, the Corvans had always relied on superior firepower and defensive capabilities. The idea of an enemy that could strike without warning and disappear without trace was completely outside their experience. Change. Tactics, he ordered. Full defensive formation. Focus on protecting our heavy ships and wait for them to make a mistake. But the humans didn't make mistakes. They continued their hit-and-run attacks for hours, slowly whittling down the Confederation fleet. Each attack was perfectly coordinated, targeting the most vulnerable ships with weapons that seemed designed specifically to penetrate Corvan defenses. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from one of the human ships." "Put it through." The main screen showed a human woman in what appeared to be military uniform. She looked young by human standards, but her eyes held the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the human defense ship Retribution," she said. "Admiral Thrackmore, your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. I'm offering you one chance to withdraw from this system peacefully." Thrackmore felt his anger spike. A junior species was offering him terms of surrender. "Captain Vasquez," he replied, "I command the finest military force in the galaxy. We do not withdraw from primitive species with stolen technology." Vasquez smiled, and Thrackmore was disturbed to realize that she looked genuinely amused. "Admiral," she said, "there's nothing primitive about quantum tunneling drives, adaptive artificial intelligence, or self-replicating defense systems, and we didn't steal this technology. We invented it. Impossible. Is it? Admiral, your people have been using the same basic technologies for thousands of years. You've refined them, improved them, made them more efficient, but you've never really innovated. You've never had to, because you always had superior numbers and resources." Thrackmore was about to respond when his tactical officer called out in alarm. "Sir, new contacts, hundreds of them." The tactical display lit up with new symbols as human ships materialized throughout the Corvan formation. But these weren't the small, fast attack ships they had been fighting. These were massive vessels, larger than Corvan battlecruisers and bristling with weapons that registered as completely unknown on Confederation sensors. "We, on the other hand," Captain Vasquez continued, "have spent 35 years knowing that we might have to fight the entire galaxy. We've had to be creative. We've had to innovate. And Admiral, we've gotten very good at it." The human battle fleet opened fire simultaneously, and Thrackmore watched in horror as his proud armada began to die. Corvan shields, designed to stop the most powerful weapons in known space, collapsed under the assault of human energy weapons. Armor that had protected his ships through countless battles was sliced apart like paper. "All ships," he ordered, "emergency hyperspace jump, withdraw, immediately." But when his ships tried to engage their hyperspace drives, nothing happened. "Hyperspace drives are not responding," Captain Mordock reported. "Something is interfering with our navigation systems." On the screen, Captain Vasquez was still smiling. "Hyperspace. Inhibitor fields," she explained. "Another one of our innovations. Nothing with a hyperspace drive can leave this system until we turn them off." Thrackmore realized with growing horror that his entire fleet was trapped. The humans had turned the Sol system into a prison, and his ships were dying one by one under the relentless assault of weapons that shouldn't exist. "Captain Vasquez," he said desperately, "what do you want?" "What do we want?" she repeated. "We want you to understand that humanity will never again accept second-class status. We want you to carry a message back to the Confederation. And Admiral, we want you to remember that this could have been avoided if you had simply treated us as equals." "I'll carry your message," Thrackmore said, hating himself for the defeat he was accepting. "Good. The hyperspace inhibitors will be shut down in 10 minutes. You have that long to collect your survivors and leave. If any Confederation ship ever enters human space again without permission, we won't be as generous." The screen went dark, leaving Thrackmore alone with the wreckage of his fleet and the knowledge that everything he had believed about Confederation superiority was wrong. Of the 200 ships that had entered the Sol system, only 37 survived to carry news of the defeat back to Nexus Prime. The battle had lasted less than 6 hours, but it marked the end of the Confederation's military supremacy. Word of the disaster spread quickly through Confederation space. The mighty Corvan hegemony, undefeated for over 1,000 years, had been crushed by a species that wasn't supposed to possess advanced technology. Panic spread through the member worlds as they realized that their protectors were not invincible. But the humans were just getting started. Over the following months, human ships appeared throughout Confederation space, conducting what they called reconnaissance missions. They would materialize near important installations, conduct detailed scans, then disappear before defense forces could respond. It was clear that they were mapping Confederation military assets and looking for weaknesses. The psychological impact was devastating. The Confederation had maintained control through the belief that their technology and military power were unmatched. The humans had shattered that belief in a single battle. Member species began questioning the value of Confederation membership. If the mighty Corvins could be defeated so easily, what protection could the Alliance really offer? Some worlds began making secret contact with human representatives, exploring the possibility of switching sides. In the depths of space, Elder Zethkari watched the unfolding crisis from her exile ship and remembered her own people's decision to withdraw rather than face humanity's ancestors. The progenitors had been wise to avoid this confrontation. The current Confederation was learning too late what her people had known for 50,000 years. Humanity was not just another species to be managed and controlled. They were something entirely different, something that could not be contained by traditional methods. They were evolution in action, adaptation personified, innovation incarnate, and they were just getting started. The war that the Confederation had started to maintain, their authority, was rapidly becoming a fight for their very survival. The humans had demonstrated technological superiority, tactical brilliance, and, most terrifyingly, the absolute refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances. As Admiral Corvash studied the reports flooding in from across the galaxy, he began to understand what Elder Zethkari had tried to warn them about all those years ago. Humanity wasn't dangerous because they were strong. They were dangerous because they made everyone else's strength irrelevant. The question now was whether the Confederation could find a way to make peace with an enemy that had proven they could win any war, and whether humanity would be interested in peace, or if they had decided that the galaxy needed new management. Either way, the age of Confederation dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun. 2 years after the Battle of Sol, the war was ending in a way that no one in the Galactic Confederation had imagined possible. They had not been conquered through superior numbers or advanced technology. They had been defeated by something far more fundamental. The simple refusal of humanity to accept that defeat was inevitable. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the command deck of the human defense ship Indomitable, watching through the viewport as Nexus Prime grew larger ahead of them. The capital world of the Galactic Confederation looked exactly as it had during humanity's first contact 40 years ago. But everything else had changed. The proud fleets that once patrolled these systems were either destroyed or hiding in distant star systems. The mighty alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was preparing to surrender. "Admiral," reported Commander James Harrison from the tactical station, "Confederation Defense Command is requesting permission to discuss terms." "Put them through," Chen ordered. The main screen activated to show Admiral Corvash in what remained of the Confederation Command Center. The proud Altarian leader looked older than his years, his golden skin dulled by stress and defeat. Around him, Chen could see the remnants of a command staff that had once coordinated the activities of 1,000 worlds. "Admiral Chen," Corvash said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute exhaustion, "I am prepared to discuss the terms of Confederation surrender." Chen studied the alien leader who had once dismissed humanity as a primitive species worthy only of junior membership. There was no anger in her expression, only the quiet satisfaction of someone who had proven a point that needed proving. "Admiral Corvash," she replied, "I appreciate your willingness to end this conflict. But before we discuss terms, I want you to understand something. This war was never about conquest, it was about respect. I'm not sure I understand. 40 years ago, humanity asked for one simple thing: to be treated as equals. We were willing to work within your system, to contribute to your alliance, to help build something greater than any single species could achieve alone. All we wanted was equal status and equal voice in decisions that affected our future." Chen paused, looking out at the capital world of the species that had once thought themselves humanity's superiors. "Instead, you offered us permanent second-class status. You told us we should be grateful for whatever scraps of technology and territory you chose to share. You could not conceive that a younger species might have anything valuable to contribute to your perfect system. We underestimated your capabilities, Corvash admitted. No, Chen corrected. You underestimated our determination. Admiral, your people have been the dominant power in this galaxy for so long that you forgot what it means to fight for survival. You've never faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated through superior firepower or political pressure. The communication channel was silent for a moment as both leaders considered the implications of what had been said. What are your terms? Corvash asked finally. Chen activated a holographic display that showed a document she had been working on for months. It was not a list of demands or a treaty of conquest. It was something entirely different. These are not terms of surrender, she said. They are the foundation for a new kind of alliance. One based on merit rather than age, on contribution rather than hierarchy, on respect rather than dominance. Corvash studied the document, his expression changing from resignation to surprise to something that might have been hope. You're proposing a complete restructuring of galactic government, he said. Yes. The old Confederation was built on the idea that older species were naturally superior to younger ones. That system worked for 10,000 years because no one ever seriously challenged it, but Admiral, that system is dead. It died the moment your fleets discovered they couldn't defeat a species you considered primitive. Chen highlighted specific sections of the document as she spoke. What I'm proposing is a true alliance of equals. Every species gets representation, based on their contribution to the common good, not their age or military power. Decisions are made through consensus and compromise, not through the diktat of the strongest. And most importantly, every member has the right to grow and develop without artificial restrictions imposed by others. And if we refuse these terms? Chen's expression didn't change, but Corvash could see steel in her eyes. Then humanity will continue to do what we've always done. We'll solve our problems ourselves and we'll defend our right to exist as free beings. But Admiral, I hope you won't refuse. Because what I'm offering you is the chance to build something better than what came before. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the crew waited quietly as their admiral negotiated the end of a war that had lasted only 2 years, but had changed the galaxy forever. They were mostly young humans who had grown up knowing that their species might have to fight for their place in the universe. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Commander Harrison monitored the tactical displays, watching as human ships took up positions throughout the Nexus Prime system. The fleet that surrounded the Confederation capital was not the largest force humanity could have assembled, but it was more than adequate to complete the conquest if necessary. Admiral, he reported quietly, all human forces are in position, defensive platforms have been secured, and the hyperspace inhibitor network is fully operational. Chen nodded but kept her attention focused on the negotiation with Admiral Corvash. I need guarantees, Corvash said. How do we know that humanity won't simply become the new dominant power? What prevents you from imposing your will on the rest of the galaxy the way we imposed ours? Because, Chen replied, we've learned something that your alliance never understood. True strength comes not from the ability to force others to obey, but from the ability to inspire them to cooperate. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Admiral. We want to help it reach its potential. She activated another section of her proposal, showing detailed plans for technological sharing, cultural exchange, and cooperative exploration programs. Look at what we're offering. Complete technological transparency, open scientific collaboration, joint exploration missions to the unknown regions. We're not trying to hoard our advantages, Admiral. We're trying to share them. Corvash was silent for a long time, studying the documents that Chen had provided. Around him, his staff members leaned in to read over his shoulder, their expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. These technological specifications, one of them whispered, they're showing us how their quantum tunnel drives work, and their artificial intelligence systems, added another. Everything is here. Complete schematics, theoretical foundations, manufacturing processes. Chen could hear the whispered conversations through the open communication channel, and she smiled. Admiral Corvash, she said, we're not your enemies. We never were. We're the species that refuse to accept limitations, and now we're offering to help you break free of yours. Why? Corvash asked. Corvash, after everything we've done, after the way we treated you, why are you offering partnership instead of demanding submission? Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question. When she answered, her voice carried the wisdom of someone who had seen both the best and worst of what different species could do to each other. Because 40 years ago an old woman tried to warn you about humanity. Elder Zethkari told you that we were dangerous, that we couldn't be controlled, that we would refuse to accept defeat no matter the odds. She was right about all of those things. Chen paused, looking directly into the camera so that her words would carry maximum impact. But she also knew something else. She knew that the same traits that make us dangerous in war make us invaluable in peace. Our refusal to accept limitations means we never stop trying to improve things. Our determination to survive means we never abandon our allies. Our creativity and adaptability mean we can solve problems that seem impossible. She gestured toward the holographic display showing her proposal. Admiral, we're offering you the chance to be our allies instead of our enemies. We're offering to help you build a galaxy where every species can reach its full potential without being held back by artificial restrictions or ancient prejudices. Corvash looked around his command center at the faces of his staff. These were beings who had dedicated their lives to the Confederation, who had believed in the system that was now crumbling around them. But in their eyes he could see something he hadn't expected. Hope. Admiral Chen, he said finally, if we accept your proposal, what guarantees do we have that the transition will be peaceful? There are nearly 1,000 member species in the Confederation. Many of them won't accept these changes easily. Then we'll convince them, Chen replied. Not through force, but through example. Admiral, imagine what we could accomplish working together. Imagine the technologies we could develop, the worlds we could explore, the problems we could solve. She activated a final section of her proposal, showing star charts of the unexplored regions beyond the galaxy's edge. There are entire galaxies out there that we've barely begun to explore. Mysteries that could take millions of years to solve. Challenges that will require the combined efforts of every intelligent species we know. That's what I'm offering you, Admiral. Not conquest, but adventure. Not dominance, but partnership in the greatest undertaking in galactic history. Corvash studied the star charts, seeing possibilities that the old Confederation had never considered. For 10,000 years they had focused on maintaining control of known space. The idea of venturing into the truly unknown had never been seriously considered. You're talking about a complete transformation of galactic civilization, he said. Yes, Chen replied. Are you interested? The command center fell silent as Admiral Corvash made the decision that would determine the future of the galaxy. Around him, his staff waited for the words that would either continue a war they could not win or begin a peace they had never imagined possible. Admiral Chen, he said finally, on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I accept your proposal. We surrender our old system of government and request partnership in building the new alliance you've described. Chen smiled, and for the first time in months it was a smile of genuine joy rather than grim determination. Admiral Corvash, she replied, welcome to the future. The formal surrender ceremony took place 1 week later in the same crystal halls where Elder Zethkari had delivered her warning 45 years earlier. Representatives from all the major species were present, along with delegations from dozens of worlds that wanted to witness the historic moment. Elder Zethkari herself was there, brought from her exile ship to see the conclusion of the crisis she had predicted. The ancient progenitor sat in a place of honor, her ageless eyes watching as Admiral Chen signed the documents that officially ended the Galactic Confederation and established the new Galactic Alliance. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Chen approached the Elder's platform. Elder Zethkari, she said respectfully, I wanted to thank you. Thank me? The old woman replied, her voice soft with age and weariness. Child, I tried to prevent this. War. No, Chen corrected gently. You tried to prevent a massacre. You knew that if the Confederation forced humanity into a corner, we would fight back with everything we had. Your warning gave them a chance to avoid that fate. The elder studied the young human leader, seeing something in her that reminded her of the best qualities of her own people from long ago. And now? She asked. What will humanity do with the power you've won? Chen looked around the great hall, seeing representatives from hundreds of species working together to plan their shared future. For the first time in galactic history, age and military strength were not the primary factors determining a species' influence. Merit, innovation, and cooperation were becoming the new measures of value. We're going to do what we've always done, Chen replied. We're going to keep moving forward, keep learning, keep growing, but now we won't have to do it alone. Elder Zeth Kari smiled, and for the first time in 50,000 years, it was a smile of genuine hope. Perhaps, she said quietly, this is what my people should have done all those eons ago. Perhaps we should have stayed and helped you grow instead of running away in fear. Maybe, Chen agreed. But Elder, you were right about one thing. Humanity is dangerous. We refuse to accept limitations, we challenge every assumption, and we never stop pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But we've learned something important from this war. What's that? The same traits that make us dangerous enemies make us invaluable allies. We don't just refuse to accept our own limitations. We refuse to accept anyone's limitations. And now, working together, there are no limits to what we can accomplish. 5 years later, the transformation of galactic civilization was nearly complete. The rigid hierarchy of the old Confederation had been replaced by a dynamic alliance, where species rose and fell in influence based on their contributions rather than their age. Technological development had accelerated beyond all previous records as human innovation, combined with alien expertise to solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. But perhaps the most important change was psychological. For the first time in galactic history, every species believed that they could exceed their current limitations if they were willing to work for it. The human example had shown that with determination, creativity, and the refusal to accept defeat, any challenge could be overcome. In the deepest archives of the new alliance, a new inscription was added to the quantum crystal records. It read, "To those who would limit the potential of others, remember that true strength lies not in the power to control, but in the wisdom to inspire." Remember the species that refused to accept limitations and helped the galaxy discover that there were no limitations to accept. And in smaller text below, almost as an afterthought, nothing could stand against it because it never stood alone. The age of humanity had indeed begun, but it was not an age of human dominance. It was an age of human inspiration, where the refusal to accept defeat had become the galaxy's most valuable resource. The elders had cautioned the stars, but no, one had believed that anything could stand against the mighty Confederation. They had been wrong on both counts. Nothing could stand against humanity, but not because they were unstoppable. Nothing could stand against them because they had taught the galaxy that standing together was stronger than standing apart. The warning had been fulfilled, but in a way that even Elder Zeth Kari had never imagined. The young bipeds of the third world had indeed claimed the void, but instead of conquering it, they had liberated it. Instead of ruling over others, they had shown others how to rule themselves. Instead of proving their superiority, they had proven that superiority was an illusion that only held power over those who chose to believe in it. Admiral Sarah Chen, now Director General of the Galactic Alliance, stood once again on the observation deck of her flagship. But this time she was not looking at a world to be conquered. She was looking at a fleet of ships from dozens of different species, all working together to explore a newly discovered galaxy beyond the edge of known space. The mission would take decades. It would require the combined knowledge and skills of every member of the Alliance. It would push the boundaries of what anyone thought possible. It was, in other words, exactly the kind of challenge that humanity had taught the galaxy to embrace. As the fleet engaged their hyperspace drives and jumped toward the unknown, Chen smiled and whispered the words that had become the unofficial motto of the new alliance. Nothing can stand against us, because we stand for each other. Behind them, the galaxy they left was no longer divided between the strong and the weak. the old and the young, the rulers and the ruled. It was united by a simple truth that humanity had proven through blood and determination, that any limitation could be overcome by those who refused to accept it. The stars had been cautioned, the warning had been ignored, and the consequences had unfolded exactly as predicted. But the future that emerged was not one of conquest and domination. It was one of cooperation and unlimited possibility. And in that future, nothing could stand against them, because they had finally learned to stand together. The massive human warship Defiance floated in the darkness of deep space. No lights shone from its hull, no engines hummed. It drifted like a dead whale in an endless black ocean. Once the ship had been the pride of humanity's fleet. Now it was just another ghost from a lost war. Captain Tark stood on the bridge of his much smaller ship, the Whisper Wind. His four-fingered hand brushed against the smooth scales of his chin as he studied the human vessel through the main viewport. The Defiance had been floating here untouched for over 100 years. "Scans complete, Captain," said Lieutenant Marek from her station. Her voice was soft but clear in the quiet bridge. "No power readings, no life signs. The ship appears completely dead." Tark nodded. "As expected. Prepare the boarding team." The Vale Collective had defeated humans in the Great War many years ago. Earth was now under their control. Most humans lived as servants, but stories said the humans had been working on special weapons near the end of the war. Weapons they never got to use. High Command wanted to know if those stories were true. "Why check this wreck now, after all these years?" asked Marek as they walked to the shuttle bay. "New data from our spies," said Tark. "They found old records about this ship. It was supposed to be destroyed in the final battle, but it wasn't. Someone hid it here on purpose." 4 more soldiers joined them in the shuttle bay. All wore the special black armor of Vale infiltrators. Their skin colors ranged from deep blue to pale green, but they all had the same cat-like eyes that could see in the dark. "Remember," Tark told his team as they checked their weapons, "we are here to gather information only. Do not damage anything important. The humans may have lost, but they were clever. We can still learn from their technology." The shuttle departed with barely a sound. Tark watched through the viewport as they approached the massive human warship. The Defiance was truly huge, almost 20 times larger than the Whisper Wind. Its hull was scarred from old battles. The name was still visible on the side in faded human letters. The shuttle found a small entry point, an emergency airlock that wasn't completely sealed. They attached their vessel to the hull and cut through. "Atmosphere. Reading?" Tark asked as they prepared to enter. "Thin but breathable," said Marek, checking her scanner. "Temperature is very cold. The ship's systems must have been running at minimal levels all these years, enough to prevent complete freezing but nothing more." Tark nodded. "Activate stealth fields." Each member of the team touched a control on their wrist. A slight shimmer ran over their bodies as the stealth technology bent light around them. They weren't completely invisible. A careful eye might catch a moving shadow, but in the dark ship they would be nearly impossible to detect. They moved through the airlock and into the dead warship. The corridors were wide and tall, built for humans who were bigger than the average Vale. Emergency lights glowed with a weak red light every 100 steps or so, casting long shadows. Their footsteps echoed slightly despite their careful movement. "This ship is huge," whispered one of the soldiers, Dren. "It could hold thousands of humans." "It did," said Tark. "The Defiance was their largest warship, but they're all gone now." They passed through what looked like living quarters. Personal items were still scattered about. Pictures, clothes, small treasures. It was as if everyone had expected to return. "I've never seen a human ship this intact before," said Marek, scanning everything with her device. "Most were destroyed, in battle or stripped for parts after the war." Tark nodded. "That's why this one is special. Someone wanted it preserved." They continued deeper into the ship. The air grew colder. Ice crystals formed in corners where moisture had gathered and frozen. The team's breath made small clouds in front of their faces. After walking for nearly an hour through the massive ship, they reached a large door. Unlike the others they had passed, this one was sealed tight. "Command deck," said Mrek, reading the human writing above the door. "This should have the information we need." Two soldiers placed small devices on the door lock. The devices hummed quietly as they worked to override the old human security. With a soft click and a hiss of air, the door opened. The command deck was large, with many stations for officers and crew. At the center was the captain's chair, and all around were dark screens and control panels. Everything was covered in a thin layer of frost. "Start downloading data from the main computer," ordered Tark. "Look for anything about weapons projects or research." As the team spread out across the command deck, Mrek's scanner began to beep softly. "Captain," she said, her voice tense. "I'm detecting a power source. It's faint but active, coming from deep within the ship." Tark frowned. "That's not possible. This ship has been dead for a century." "The reading is clear," insisted Mrek, "and it's growing stronger, as if something is waking up." A soldier called from across the room. "Captain, I found a ship layout. There's a restricted area 5 levels down in the center of the ship. It's labeled Project Lazarus." Tark felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Lazarus, he knew that name from human mythology, the one who rose from the dead. "We need to check it," he decided. "Dren, keep working on the data. The rest of you come with me." They found a service ladder that took them down through the levels of the ship. The air grew even colder as they descended. By the time they reached the 5th level down, their breath formed thick clouds in front of them. The corridors here were different, more secure, with reinforced walls and fewer access points. They followed Mrek's scanner until they reached another, large door. This one was even more heavily secured than the command deck. Above it, in faded red letters, were the words, "Project Lazarus, authorized personnel only." "The power reading is coming from behind this door," said Mrek. "It's definitely active and growing stronger." Tark hesitated. Their mission was to gather information, not to interfere with anything that might still be operating. But his curiosity was too strong. "Open it," he ordered. It took longer this time. The security was more advanced. But eventually, the door slid open with a grinding sound of metal on metal. Beyond was a large circular room. In the center stood a tall cylinder made of some clear material. Inside the cylinder was a dark shape roughly the size of a human. As they entered, lights began to come on. Soft at first, then brighter. Computer screens flickered to life around the room. A gentle hum filled the air as machines that had been sleeping for a century began to work again. "What's happening?" asked one of the soldiers nervously. "We triggered something," said Mrek, looking at her scanner. "The power levels are rising fast." Tark approached the cylinder in the center. As the lights grew brighter, he could see clearly what was inside. It was a human male floating in a clear liquid. His eyes were closed. He looked as if he was sleeping. "Is it alive?" asked someone. Before Tark could answer, a voice spoke from all around them. A calm, computerized voice speaking in the human language. "Intruder alert. Project Lazarus security protocols activated. Awakening sequence initiated." The liquid in the cylinder began to drain away. The human's fingers twitched. "We need to leave," said Tark, suddenly understanding that they had made a terrible mistake. "Now." But it was too late. As they turned to run, the human's eyes snapped open. Humanity's last weapon was awake. Cold. That was the first thing Commander Gray felt. A deep cold that seemed to reach into his bones. Then came the pain, like needles in every part of his body as his nerves began to work again. He tried to move but couldn't. His muscles were not ready yet. Through blurry eyes, he saw strange shapes moving around the room, shapes that were not human. Memory came back in broken pieces. The war, the experiments, Project Lazarus. How long had he been asleep? A voice spoke in his mind. It was calm and without emotion. "Commander Gray, I am Atlas, the ship's AI. You have been in suspended animation for 103 years, 47 days, 14 hours. The ship has been boarded by Veil forces. Project Lazarus protocols are now active." Gray tried to speak but could only make a weak, Sound. His throat was too dry, his tongue too stiff. Do not attempt to move or speak yet. Atlas continued in his mind. Your body is still recovering. The nanomachines are working to repair the damage from long-term suspension. Gray felt a warm sensation spreading through his body. The pain began to fade. He could now see more clearly. 5 aliens stood in the room. They had thin bodies with blue-green skin and large eyes. They were looking at him with what seemed like fear. He recognized their kind from his briefings before. The suspension, Veil soldiers, humanity's enemy in the war. The tallest alien barked orders to the others. They started to back away toward the door. Gray needed to stop them. If they escaped, they would bring more. He wasn't ready to fight yet. With great effort, Gray sent a thought to Atlas. Lock. Down. The ship. A loud alarm began to sound throughout the Defiance. Heavy metal doors slammed shut all over the ship, including the one to the Lazarus chamber. The aliens jumped in surprise, then pulled out weapons. Small devices that Gray knew could fire energy beams. What did you do? The tall alien demanded, looking at the computers around the room. Disable these alarms. Gray couldn't answer yet, but he felt stronger with each passing second. The nanomachines in his blood were working fast, repairing cells, rebuilding muscle, pumping strength back into his body. The intruders are from a Veil scout ship called the Whisperwind, Atlas informed him. There are 6 of them on board. 1 remains on their command deck. They have breached our security using advanced tools. Shall I activate defense protocols? Not yet, Gray thought back. First, tell me what happened. The war ended. 102 years ago. Humanity lost. Earth is under Veil control. Most colonies were destroyed or captured. The Defiance was hidden as ordered, with you in suspension. We were to wait until conditions were right for Project Lazarus to be deployed. Gray closed his eyes. So they had lost after all. Everything and everyone he had known was gone. All that remained was his mission. The aliens were trying to open the door now, without success. The tall one, likely the leader, approached the cylinder where Gray floated. Can you understand me, human? The alien asked in rough but understandable English. I am Captain Tark of the Veil Collective. We mean no harm. We are only here to gather information. Gray still couldn't speak, but he could move his eyes now. He looked directly at Tark. The alien seemed uncomfortable under his gaze. The ship has locked us in, said a female alien working at a computer console. I can't override it. Keep trying, Mrek, ordered Tark, not looking away from Gray. Our shuttle is still attached to the airlock. Dren needs to know what's happening. Gray felt his fingers twitch. Then his hand moved. The warm feeling was spreading, bringing life back to his limbs. The liquid around him had completely drained now, and he was simply hanging in the cylinder held by supports around his body. Commander, said Atlas, the nanomachines report that basic motor functions are restored. Speech will follow shortly. Your weapon systems are still calibrating. Weapon systems. Gray almost smiled at that. He wasn't just a soldier, he was something new. The scientists had changed him, filled his body with billions of tiny machines that could rebuild him, enhance him, turn him into something more than human. The perfect soldier for a war that had already been lost. The cylinder hissed and began to open. The aliens stepped back, raising their weapons. Gray fell forward onto his hands and knees, coughing and gasping. The air felt strange in lungs that hadn't breathed on their own for a century. Be careful, said Tark to his team. We don't know what this human can do. Gray looked up at them. His vision was sharp now, sharper than it had ever been. He could see details he shouldn't be able to see, the slight movements of their skin as they breathed, the flow of blood beneath their scales. You should not have come here, Gray said. His voice was rough from disuse, but it worked. He slowly stood up. His body felt lighter than he remembered, stronger. We will leave peacefully, said Tark, his weapon still pointed at Gray. Just unlock the doors. Gray took a step forward. The aliens tensed. You don't understand, he said, his voice getting stronger. You woke me up. Project Lazarus is now active. It can't be stopped. What is Project Lazarus? Asked Marek, looking nervous. What does it do? Gray took another step. The nanomachines were feeding him information now. Weak points in the aliens, armor, the capabilities of their weapons, escape routes through the ship. I am Project Lazarus, he said simply. One of the aliens fired his weapon in panic. The energy beam hit Gray in the shoulder. It burned, but not as much as it should. He looked down at the wound and watched as the skin began to heal, the edges pulling together. The aliens stared in shock. Impossible, whispered Tark. Gray moved fast, faster than he should have been able to. He grabbed the weapon from the alien who had shot him and crushed it in his hand. Metal and plastic crumpled like paper. The room erupted into chaos. The aliens scattered, firing their weapons. Gray dodged with unnatural speed. He didn't want to kill them, not yet. He needed information first. As he fought, more memories returned. The scientists explaining what they had done to him. How the nanomachines would learn and adapt. How he would be humanity's last hope if all else failed. Gray grabbed Marek and threw her against the wall, hard enough to stun but not to kill. 2 more aliens tried to flank him. He jumped, higher than any human should be able to, and landed behind them. A quick strike to the back of their heads, and they dropped unconscious. Tark and the last soldier backed away, still firing. Gray felt the hits, but the pain was already fading. The nanomachines were learning, adapting to the weapons, making him stronger. What are you? Tark asked, true fear in his voice now. I told you, said Gray, advancing on them. I am Project Lazarus, humanity's last weapon. The final soldier ran at Gray with some kind of electric baton. Gray caught his arm and twisted. The alien cried out in pain and dropped to his knees. Now only Tark remained, backed against the wall, his weapon empty. Your people took everything from us, said Gray, his voice calm and cold. Our world, our future. But they missed something, they missed me. Tark looked around desperately for an escape. There was none. The war is over, human, he said. It has been for a century. What do you hope to achieve now? You're alone. Gray smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm going to do what I was made to do. I'm going to give humanity a second chance. He reached out and grabbed Tark by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. And you, he said, are going to help me. In the silence that followed, Atlas spoke again in Gray's mind. Commander, I have detected a transmission from the shuttle attached to our hull. The 6th intruder has reported your awakening to their ship. Gray nodded. Good, he said aloud. Let them come. He looked into Tark's frightened eyes. Your friends will bring more ships, and those ships will bring more, and I will be waiting for all of them. The human smiled again, and in that moment, he didn't look human at all. Project Lazarus has begun. Captain Tark sat on the cold floor of the storage room that had become his prison. His wrists were bound with metal wire, and his weapons were gone. The human had put him here an hour ago, after knocking out the rest of his team. The door slid open. Commander Gray stood there, now dressed in a black uniform he had found somewhere on the ship. He looked different than before, stronger, more alert. His eyes seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. Your officer Dren has called for backup, Gray said, entering the room. Your ship, the Whisperwind, is sending more soldiers. They'll be here in 2 hours. Tark said nothing. He was still trying to understand what he was facing. This human should have been weak after a century in suspension. Instead, he moved like a perfect fighting machine. Gray crouched down in front of him. I need information, Captain. Tell me about the galaxy now. What happened after the war? How many humans survived? Tark looked away. Why should I tell you anything? Because I'll find out anyway, Gray said simply. Your friends will be here soon, but they won't be ready for what's waiting for them. Something in the human's voice made Tark look up. What are you planning to do? Gray smiled. I'm going to take their ship. Then I'm going to find any humans who are still alive. And then I'm going to take back what your people stole from us. Tark laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Impossible. The Veil controls dozens of star systems. We have thousands of ships. You are one human on one old warship. This ship was just my cocoon, Gray said. I'm what matters. Project Lazarus wasn't about building a weapon. It was about creating a soldier who could adapt to any enemy, learn from them, become stronger with each fight. He leaned closer to Tark. The more of your people who try to stop me, the stronger I'll become. A chill ran down Tark's spine. He had seen how fast the human healed, how quickly he learned to avoid their weapons. If what he said was true, Gray stood up. The Defiance is waking up. Atlas is bringing systems online. When your reinforcements arrive, we'll be ready. He left, the door sliding shut behind him. Tark tested his bonds again. No hope of breaking free. He was trapped here while the human prepared to slaughter his team. Gray walked through the corridors of the Defiance, touching the walls occasionally. The ship felt like an old friend. He had spent years serving on it before agreeing to become part of Project Lazarus. Now it was the last piece of the world he had known. Commander, Atlas spoke in his mind. Main power is restored to 43%. Weapons, systems are at 27%. Life support is stable. Good, Gray said aloud. What about the ship's memory banks? Did they survive? All critical data is intact. I am running diagnostics on the genetic storage facility now. Gray nodded. That was the most important part. The Defiance wasn't just a warship. It also carried the seeds of humanity's rebirth, DNA samples, embryos, and the technology to grow them. If that was intact, there was still hope. He reached the bridge and sat in the captain's chair. Screens lit up around him, showing the status of the ship's systems. Through the main viewport, he could see the stars. They looked the same as they had a century ago, cold and distant. Commander, I have restored internal sensors. I can now track the aliens still aboard. Gray leaned forward. Show me. A screen displayed a map of the ship. 4 dots representing Tark's team members were in the storage room where Gray had locked them. A 5th dot moved along a corridor 2 levels down. Dren, Gray said. The one who stayed on their command deck. He must have come looking for his team. He stood up. Time to begin the hunt. Dren moved carefully through the dark corridor, weapon ready. Something had gone wrong. The ship had suddenly locked down, and he had lost contact with Captain Tark and the others. After waiting for an hour, he had decided to leave the command deck and find them. The ship was different now. Lights were on in some areas. Air was flowing through the vents. It felt like the massive vessel was waking up around him. A sound made him freeze. Footsteps, somewhere ahead. Dren pressed himself against the wall, trying to blend into the shadows. His stealth field was active, making him nearly invisible. The footsteps stopped. Dren held his breath. After a moment, he relaxed slightly. Whatever it was had moved on. Your stealth technology is impressive, said a voice right next to his ear. Dren spun around, firing his weapon at the empty air. The energy beam hit nothing. Heart racing, he backed away. But the nanomachines in my eyes can detect the heat from your body, the voice continued, now coming from behind him. Dren turned again, firing wildly. Still nothing. I can hear your heartbeat, the voice said, now above him. I can smell your fear. Dren looked up. The human was somehow clinging to the ceiling, looking down at him with those strange glowing eyes. Before Dren could fire again, the human dropped on top of him. They fought briefly, but it was no contest. The human was too fast, too strong. Within seconds, Dren was pinned to the floor, his weapon gone. Where is your shuttle? The human asked. Dren struggled but couldn't break free. Airlock 12, he finally gasped. The human nodded. Thank you. Now you're going to join your friends. A sharp pain and darkness took Dren. Gray carried the unconscious alien to the storage room and locked him in with the others. That was all of them accounted for. Now he could focus on preparing for the reinforcements. He made his way to Airlock 12, where the alien shuttle was still attached to the Defiance. It was small but sleek, clearly built for speed and stealth. Commander, Atlas said, I have accessed the shuttle's systems. It contains valuable data on current veil technology and star charts. Download everything, Gray ordered. Then prepare a surprise for our visitors. He placed small devices at key points inside the shuttle. Devices he had found in the Defiance's armory. They weren't bombs. Gray didn't want to destroy the incoming Veil ship. He wanted to capture it. The genetic storage facility is intact, Atlas reported as Gray worked. All samples are viable. The artificial wombs are operational. Gray paused, relief washing over him. That meant he could fulfill his mission even if he found no human survivors. He could restart his species from these stored cells. How long until the Veil reinforcements arrive, he asked. Approximately 90 minutes, based on the transmission data. Gray nodded and finished setting his trap. Then he returned to the bridge to prepare the ship's weapons. He wouldn't need much, just enough to disable the Veil vessel without destroying it. As he worked, his mind drifted to the past, to the scientists who had created him, to the desperate faces of his fellow soldiers as they realized the war was lost, to the day he had volunteered to become the first subject of Project Lazarus. We're putting all our hope in you, the lead scientist had told him. If we lose the war, you may be humanity's last chance. Gray hadn't fully understood then what that meant. Now he did. He was alone, the last soldier of a defeated species, but he wouldn't be alone for long. Commander, Atlas interrupted his thoughts. I detect a vessel approaching at high speed. It will reach us in 10 minutes. Gray sat up straight. That's too soon, you said 90 minutes. This is not the reinforcements we expected. It is a different ship, much larger, class unknown. A cold feeling settled in Gray's stomach. Show me. The main screen lit up with an image of a massive ship approaching. It was not like any Veil vessel Gray had seen before. It was black and sleek, with strange growths along its hull that looked almost organic. The ship is not broadcasting any identification. It appears to be scanning us. Gray frowned. Raise shields. Power up weapons. As the Defiance hummed to life around him, Gray realized this was an unexpected complication. Who were these newcomers? Friends or enemies? Either way, they were about to meet humanity's last weapon, and he was ready. Gray watched the large unknown ship through the Defiance's main viewport. It had stopped about 1,000 kilometers away and was just sitting there, as if studying them. Atlas, any response to our hails? Gray asked. None, Commander. They are scanning us extensively but not communicating. Gray frowned. This complicated his plans. He had been prepared for the Veil reinforcements, but this new ship was something else entirely. A light flashed on the command console. What's that? Gray asked. Captain Tark is requesting to speak with you. He seems agitated. Gray hesitated, then nodded. Bring him to the bridge. 2 small security robots that Gray had activated earlier escorted Tark onto the bridge a few minutes later. The alien captain's hands were still bound, but his eyes widened when he saw the strange ship on the screen. No, Tark whispered. Not them. Not here. Gray turned to him. You know this ship? Tark nodded slowly. They're called the Harvesters. They appeared about 30 years ago. They attack ships and colonies, take what they want, and leave nothing alive. Another enemy of humanity? Gray asked. Tark made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. They're everyone's enemy. The Veil, humans, all species. They don't communicate, don't negotiate, they just take. Gray studied the ship more carefully now. The strange growths on its hull looked even more disturbing. Are they stronger than the Veil? Different, Tark said. Their technology is partly biological. Their ships can repair themselves, they adapt to attacks. He looked directly at Gray. Like you. Gray felt a chill. Was this why he had been awakened? Not to fight the Veil, but this new threat? A new alert sounded. 3 small craft have launched from the Harvester ship, Atlas reported. They appear to be boarding vessels. They're coming for us, Tark said, his voice tight with fear. They must have detected the power signature when you woke up. Gray made a quick decision. Atlas, release Tark's team from the storage room. Bring them here. Tark looked surprised. Why would you do that? Because we might need to work together. To survive, Gray said simply. The security robots left to retrieve the other aliens. Gray turned back to the screen, watching as the three small ships approached quickly. What weapons do they use? He asked Tark. Biological mostly. Acid sprays, paralytic gas. And their soldiers. Tark shuddered. They're not like anything you've seen before. The door opened again and the rest of Tark's team was brought in. They looked confused and wary. What's happening? Mrek asked, seeing the tense scene on the bridge. We have a common enemy, Gray explained, pointing to the screen. The harvesters are here, and they're boarding the ship. The aliens looked at the screen, and Gray saw the same fear in all their eyes that he had seen in Tark's. We're all going to die, Dren said quietly. Gray shook his head. Not if we work together. He turned to Tark. I'll release your restraints if you agree to help fight them off. Tark hesitated, then nodded. We'll help. None of us want to be taken by the harvesters. Gray freed Tark's hands, then looked at the whole group. Tell me everything you know about fighting these things. As the aliens quickly shared what they knew, Atlas continued to monitor the approaching ships. They will reach us in approximately 10 minutes, the AI reported. We need weapons, Gray said to Tark. Will your energy weapons work against them? Yes, but they adapt quickly, Tark replied. We need to vary our attacks. Gray nodded. I'll take you to the armory. We have different types of weapons there. As they rushed through the corridors, Gray noticed that the aliens no longer seemed afraid of him. The greater threat of the harvesters had made them allies, at least for now. The armory was large, filled with weapons from the war. Gray distributed them to the aliens, who looked impressed by the human technology. These are more powerful than what we carry, Mrek said, examining a rifle. We were losing the war, Gray said. We had to develop better weapons fast. Once they were armed, Gray split them into two teams. Tark, you and two others guard the main entry points on the port side. Mrek and Dren will come with me to the starboard side. Those are the most likely places they'll try to board. Commander? Atlas interrupted. I've detected a breach in the hull near Cargo Bay 3. The harvesters are already aboard. Gray cursed under his breath. They're faster than I expected. Tark, change of plans. Take your team to Cargo Bay 3. Try to contain them there. We'll join you as soon as we can. Tark nodded and motioned to his soldiers. They moved out quickly, weapons ready. Gray led Mrek and Dren in the opposite direction. We need to circle around and hit them from behind, he explained. As they moved through the ship, Gray tried to process what was happening. In just a few hours, he had gone from being in suspended animation to fighting alongside the very aliens who had defeated humanity. The universe had changed more than he could have imagined during his long sleep. Suddenly, a terrible screeching sound echoed through the corridor. It was followed by the sound of energy weapons firing, then screams. That's Tark's team, Mrek said, her large eyes wide with fear. Gray broke into a run, the two aliens close behind him. They reached a junction in the corridor and saw something moving toward them from the shadows. It wasn't Tark or his team. The creature that stepped into the light was like nothing Gray had ever seen. It stood taller than a human, with a skeletal body covered in a shiny black substance that looked partly metal and partly organic. Its head had no eyes that Gray could see, just a series of sensory pits. Its arms ended in long, blade-like claws. Harvester, whispered Dren, raising his weapon. Before Dren could fire, the creature moved with incredible speed. Its arm extended, actually stretched, and the claw slashed across Dren's chest. The alien fell back with a cry of pain. Gray fired his rifle. The energy beam hit the harvester directly, burning a hole in its chest, but the hole began to close almost immediately, the edges knitting together. They heal fast, Mrek said, also firing her weapon. We need to hit them with everything at once. Gray nodded. Together on my mark, now. They both fired continuously. The combined energy beams finally overwhelmed the creature's ability to heal, and it collapsed to the floor. Gray rushed to check on Dren. The wound was deep but not fatal. Can you move? He asked. Dren nodded weakly. Yes, but what about Tark and the others? That was a good question. Gray tapped his wrist communicator. "Tark, report." Static answered him. Then a faint voice broke through. "Gray, too many of them, falling back to bridge." Gray helped Dren to his feet. "We need to get back to the bridge. It's the most defensible position." As they made their way through the ship, they encountered 2 more harvesters. Each fight was difficult, even with Gray's enhanced abilities. The creatures seemed to learn from each encounter, becoming harder to kill. When they finally reached the bridge, they found Tark there with only 1 other member of his team. The third was gone. "Lost him in Cargo Bay 3, Tark said grimly. "These things, they don't just kill, they collect. They took his body." Gray sealed the bridge doors. "Atlas, status report. I detect 12 harvester life forms aboard the Defiance. More are coming. Their main ship is moving closer." "Can we jump to hyperspace?" Gray asked. "Negative. The hyperdrive needs another hour to charge after being dormant for so long." Gray looked at the 4 aliens who now stood with him against this new threat. Former enemies united by a greater danger. "We need to do more than just survive this," he said. "We need to understand them, learn why they're here, what they want." Tark looked at him curiously. "Why? What does it matter what they want? They're going to kill us all." Gray shook his head. "If we can understand them, maybe we can stop them. Not just here, but everywhere." He looked at the screen showing the massive harvester ship. "This is bigger than our old war now. This is about survival for all our species." Tark was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right." He hesitated, then added, Maybe that's why we found you. Why you were awakened now." Gray hadn't considered that. Was this the real purpose of Project Lazarus? Not to save humanity from the Veil, but to save all species from this new threat? The bridge doors shuddered as something heavy slammed against them. "They're here," Mrek said. Gray readied his weapon. "Then let's show them what we can do together." The bridge doors shook again as the harvesters pounded on them from outside. Gray, Tark, Mrek, and the 2 remaining Veil soldiers stood ready, weapons aimed at the entrance. "The doors won't hold much longer," Tark said grimly. Gray nodded. His mind was racing, trying to find a way out of this trap. The nanomachines in his blood were working overtime, feeding him information, analyzing the situation. "Atlas," he called out. "Can you seal off the bridge with emergency force fields?" "Negative, Commander. That system is still offline." A large dent appeared in the metal door. The harvesters were getting closer to breaking through. Gray looked around. The bridge, his enhanced vision taking in every detail. Then he noticed something. A small maintenance hatch in the floor. "There," he pointed. "Where does that lead?" "That hatch connects to the maintenance tunnels that run throughout the ship," Atlas replied. "They lead to all major systems, including the engine room." Gray turned to the others. "New plan. We're not going to fight them here. We're going to outthink them." Mrek looked skeptical. "How? They've cut off our escape routes." "Not all of them," Gray said, moving to the hatch and pulling it open. "We can use these tunnels to reach the engine room. From there, we might be able to power up the weapon systems fully." Tark nodded slowly. "It could work. But what about the harvesters already on board?" "They'll follow us. I'm counting on it," Gray said with a small smile. "Atlas, I need you to do something when I give the signal." "Ready, Commander." Gray explained his plan quickly. The others listened, their expressions changing from doubt to cautious hope. "That's either brilliant or suicidal," Tark said when Gray finished. "Maybe both," Gray admitted. "Now let's move before they break through." The bridge doors buckled inward as Gray helped the injured Dren into the maintenance tunnel. Tark and Mrek followed, with the last Veil soldier going next. Gray went last, pulling the hatch closed just as the bridge doors finally gave way, and the harvesters poured in. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dark. They crawled on hands and knees, following Atlas's directions through their communicators. Above them, they could hear the heavy footsteps of harvesters searching the bridge. "They'll figure out where we went soon enough," Gray whispered. "We need to move faster." They pushed on through the cramped space. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached another hatch. Gray pushed it open, and they emerged into the engine room, the heart of the massive warship. The space was huge, filled with towering power cores and humming machinery. The main engine, a massive cylinder in the center, pulsed with blue energy as it slowly charged the hyperdrive. Atlas, status report, Gray said as they closed the hatch behind them. 16 harvester life forms now aboard. They are spreading throughout the ship. Their main vessel has moved closer and is attempting to establish a physical connection to our hull. They're trying to link their ship to ours, Tark explained. It's how they take over larger vessels. Gray nodded. Then, we don't have much time. He moved to a control panel and began inputting commands. Atlas, how much power can we divert to the main weapons array? 73% if we delay the hyperdrive charge. Do it, Gray ordered. And prepare the ship's defenses for my signal. As Atlas carried out his commands, Gray turned to the others. Barricade the doors, we need to buy a few minutes. They worked quickly, pushing heavy equipment against the main entrance. Gray continued working at the control panel, his fingers flying over the controls as the nanomachines helped him remember ship systems he hadn't used in over a century. What exactly is your plan? Rek asked, joining him at the panel. The harvesters adapt to attacks, right? Gray said, not looking up from his work. And so do I. But there's a difference. He finally looked at her. I can adapt faster. A loud bang on the barricaded door interrupted them. The harvesters had found them. They're here, Tark called, raising his weapon. Gray finished his work at the panel and moved to stand beside the others. Remember the plan. When I give the signal, head for the escape pods. The barricade shuddered as the harvesters hammered at it. Pieces of metal began to give way. Gray, Tark said suddenly, if we don't make it, I want you to know something. The war with humans, many of us didn't want it. There were those in the Veil who sought peace. Gray looked at him in surprise. Why are you telling me this now? Because you should know, Tark said simply. The past doesn't have to define the future. Before Gray could respond, the barricade collapsed. 3 harvester creatures burst into the engine room, their blade-like claws extended. Now, Gray shouted, firing his weapon. The others fired too, their combined shots briefly overwhelming the first harvester. But the other 2 rushed forward, moving faster than seemed possible. Gray met them head-on. The nanomachines had been studying the harvesters through his eyes, learning their weaknesses. Now they flowed through his muscles, making him faster, stronger. He dodged a swipe from a blade-like arm and struck back, his fist connecting with the creature's head. The impact would have broken his hand if not for the nanomachines reinforcing his bones. Go! He shouted to the others as he fought. Get to the escape pods. Tark hesitated, then nodded. He helped Dren up and they headed for the far exit. Mrek and the other soldier covering them. Gray continued fighting, keeping the harvesters focused on him. More were coming through the door now. He couldn't hold them all off for long. Atlas, he called out, dodging another attack. Initiate Lazarus Protocol. Suddenly, electrical energy surged through the floor plates. The harvesters convulsed as the current ran through their partly metallic bodies. Gray felt it too, but the nanomachines protected him, insulating his vital organs. He used the moment to break away and run for the exit. The others had already gone ahead. As he ran, the ship's emergency lights began to flash. Lazarus Protocol initiated, Atlas announced shipwide. All systems diverted to primary weapon, firing in 60 seconds. Gray sprinted through the corridors, the ship coming alive around him as emergency systems activated. He could hear the harvesters recovering, following him. But he had a head start. He reached the escape pod bay just as Tark was helping the last of his team inside a pod. Gray, Tark called. Hurry. Gray jumped inside, and Tark sealed the door behind him. Through the small viewport, they could see harvesters appearing at the end of the corridor. Launch, Gray ordered. The pod shot away from the Defiance with a violent jerk. As they gained distance, they could see the massive harvester ship through the viewport. It had attached itself to the Defiance like a parasite, dark tendrils extending from its hull to connect with the human vessel. Will it work? Marek asked quietly. We'll know soon, Gray replied. They watched in tense silence. Then, suddenly, the Defiance began to glow. Energy built up around its main weapon array, growing brighter and brighter. Lazarus protocol complete. Atlas's voice came through their communicators. Weapon firing. Goodbye, Commander. A blinding beam of energy erupted from the Defiance, cutting straight through the Harvester ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then both ships exploded in a massive ball of light. The shockwave hit their escape pod, sending it tumbling. Gray and the aliens were thrown against the walls. Alarms blared as emergency systems struggled to stabilize them. When the pod finally stopped spinning, they looked out at the debris field where the two ships had been. You sacrificed your ship, Tark said softly. Your people's legacy. Gray shook his head. Not all of it. He tapped a small device on his wrist. Before we left, I downloaded Atlas's core memory and the genetic database. Everything we need is here. What now? Asked Marek. Gray looked at Tark. You said there were those among your people who wanted peace with humans. Take me to them. Tark was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I will. But the Harvesters, there are more of them out there. I know, Gray said, and we'll face them together. He looked down at his hands, feeling the nanomachines coursing through his veins. That's why I was created, not just to save humanity, but to help all species survive. As the small pod drifted in space, Gray looked out at the stars. They were the same stars he had known a century ago, but the galaxy was different now, and so was he. Project Lazarus wasn't just about awakening a weapon, it was about awakening hope. Set course for the nearest Vale outpost, Gray told Tark. We have work to do. Humanity's last weapon had become something more, the beginning of a new chapter for all species in the galaxy. The end.